In 2025, the American dream is collapsing in cities you never thought would fall. Across the nation, once affordable places have transformed into financial traps. In some cities, mortgage payments now swallow 67% of the average household income, a number so crushing it leaves families choosing between keeping a roof over their heads or paying for the basics of life. For generations, Americans were told that if the big coastal metros became too expensive, they could always move inland, find refuge in smaller, growing cities, and build a life there. But that promise has broken. This video reveals 10 more US cities Americans can no longer afford to live in. And what makes this list different is the betrayal. These were supposed to be the escape cities, the affordable alternatives to New York, San Francisco, or Los Angeles. Instead, they've collapsed under record foreclosures, exploding insurance premiums, and debt levels not seen since the crash of 2008. Stay with us until the end, because the number one city will shock you. It proves no corner of America is safe from the affordability crisis tearing the country apart in 2025. Austin, Texas, has become one of the most unaffordable housing markets in the nation, with median home prices more than doubling since 2015 and now demanding over 4 times the typical household income. In 2025, a mortgage in Austin consumes nearly 67% of the average household's earnings, far above the 30% affordability threshold, long considered the breaking point. This isn't the Austin people remember, the quirky college town, the haven for artists, the affordable alternative to the chaos of California. Instead, it has transformed into a cautionary tale of runaway growth and collapsing affordability. Between 2010 and 2020, Austin's population exploded by nearly 1/3, one of the fastest growth rates in America. That influx brought tech jobs and investors flush with cash, but it also brought a tidal wave of speculation that forced housing prices into the stratosphere. The median home value here, which sat comfortably under $300,000 just a decade ago, has surged past $570,000 in 2025. Meanwhile, wages have struggled to keep pace, leaving longtime residents squeezed out of neighborhoods they once called home. For renters, the situation is no better. Median rents have jumped by more than 40% in just 5 years, forcing families to devote nearly half their monthly incomes simply to keep a roof over their heads. Even worse, signs of financial strain are emerging. Foreclosure filings in Austin have climbed significantly in the past year, signaling that households who stretched to buy during the boom are now buckling under the weight of higher interest rates and property taxes. And with property insurance premiums also climbing across Texas, the total cost of homeownership is spiraling out of control. Austin was supposed to be the escape route, the affordable alternative to Los Angeles, San Francisco, or New York. But instead, it has joined their ranks as a city where the middle class is priced out, where the dream of owning a home is slipping away, and where younger generations are realizing they may never afford to live in the place they grew up. And here's the chilling part. What's happening in Austin is not an isolated story. Across America's so-called growth hubs, affordability is collapsing in the same way. Wages lagging, debt piling up, and the middle class losing its grip on stability. But the next city on our list shows that this affordability crisis is reaching even higher altitudes, where the cost of living has climbed so steeply it is now threatening the very future of the Rocky Mountain West. Denver, Colorado has reached the breaking point, with mortgage payments now consuming nearly 70% of the average household income. Even renting has become unsustainable, with median rents climbing by more than 25% since 2020, leaving many families spending over 1/3 of their paychecks just to keep a roof over their heads. Once considered a desirable balance of affordability and lifestyle, Denver's housing market has spiraled into crisis. In the past decade, home prices in the Denver metro area have nearly doubled, rising from around $350,000 in 2013 to well over $650,000 in 2025. For younger families and first-time buyers, that leap is simply out of reach. The population boom that once fueled Denver's economic rise is now one of its biggest liabilities. Between 2010 and 2020, Denver gained more than 100,000 new residents, driving housing demand far beyond what the market could supply. Builders struggled to keep up, and by the time interest rates surged in the early 2020s, affordability had collapsed. Today, many Denver households who bought at the peak are facing financial strain. with mortgage delinquencies quietly increasing. Renters are no safer. A two-bedroom apartment in Denver now costs an average of $2,000 per month, up from around $1,600 just 5 years ago. With wages rising far more slowly, the gap between income and cost of living grows wider each year. For many workers, even those with stable jobs, the dream of owning a home in Denver has shifted permanently out of reach. The ripple effects stretch beyond families and into the local economy. Consumer spending slows when so much of a paycheck is tied to housing costs. Small businesses feel the squeeze as fewer residents have discretionary income. And the city's own tax base becomes increasingly fragile as residents leave for cheaper states, draining the workforce that once made Denver a booming hub. Denver was supposed to represent the promise of the Mountain West, a place where families priced out of California or the Northeast could still find stability. Instead, it has become a warning. Even inland cities, once hailed as affordable havens, are now collapsing under the weight of inflated home prices, stagnant wages, and rising debt. And yet, Denver's collapse is not the most extreme, because the next city on our list shows that affordability doesn't just collapse in booming metros. It can vanish in the desert, where foreclosure rates are already surging at levels that echo the worst moments of the 2008 housing crash. Phoenix, Arizona, is facing a housing storm, unlike anything in its modern history. In 2025, foreclosure filings here have surged by more than 40% compared to last year, a level of distress that hasn't been seen since the aftermath of the 2008 collapse. Behind the numbers are thousands of families suddenly unable to keep up with their mortgages as rising costs push them over the edge. For years, Phoenix was the poster child for affordability. People fleeing California and other expensive states came here chasing lower housing prices and the promise of a fresh start in the desert. That demand drove prices into the stratosphere. In just the past decade, the median home value has jumped from under $200,000 to well over $400,000, doubling in less than 10 years. And yet, wages in the metro area have barely budged, leaving locals priced out of their own neighborhoods. Renters are being hit just as hard. The typical monthly rent in Phoenix now sits around $2,000, up from roughly $1,400 only 5 years ago. That means many households are devoting more than 40% of their income just to housing, far above the 30% affordability line. For younger workers and retirees on fixed incomes, this pressure is unsustainable. Another layer of financial strain is environmental. Arizona's ongoing water crisis has already led to higher utility bills, and insurance premiums are climbing as climate risk reshapes the market. What was once billed as a low-cost desert haven has now become a city where basic living expenses are spiraling out of control. The social consequences are just as alarming. Longtime residents who thought they had escaped the chaos of coastal cities are finding themselves priced out again, this time in the very place they believed was secure. Homelessness is rising across Maricopa County, and tent encampments have become a common sight near the downtown core. Phoenix is no longer a safe landing spot. It has become a warning to the rest of America. Even the cities that once represented the promise of affordability are now collapsing under the weight of debt, insurance costs, and housing shortages. And as bad as Phoenix looks, the next city on this list shows that the affordability crisis isn't confined to booming metros. Because in the heart of the South, rents and home prices have risen so steeply that families are being forced to spend nearly half of their paychecks just to stay housed. Nashville, Tennessee, has become one of the most punishing rental markets in the United States. In 2025, new leases are demanding more than 40% of the average household income, nearly double the long-standing 30% affordability line. For working families and young professionals, that figure isn't just a statistic, it is the breaking point that forces impossible choices. Over the last decade, Nashville's population exploded by nearly 15% as newcomers poured in chasing jobs and a lower cost of living. But that growth fueled a housing frenzy. From 2013 to 2025, the median home price in the Nashville metro area soared from around $220,000 to well above $450,000. Wages, meanwhile, have lagged behind, leaving locals boxed out of neighborhoods their families have lived in for generations. The rental squeeze has been just as severe. In 2020, a typical two-bedroom apartment rented for about $1,200 a month. By 2025, that same unit costs close to $1,800. For a household earning Nashville's median income, That rent burden translates into more than 40% of take-home pay being swallowed by housing. It is no surprise that eviction filings across Davidson County have climbed sharply in the past 2 years, reflecting a population pushed to the edge. Behind the bright lights of Broadway and the booming tourism industry lies a city buckling under the weight of its own success. Musicians, service workers, and even teachers now struggle to afford housing anywhere near the city center. Many are being driven to distant suburbs, spending hours in traffic just to hang on to jobs downtown. The broader economic impact is grim. When households are forced to sink nearly half their income into rent or mortgages, consumer spending shrinks. Local businesses feel the squeeze, city revenues suffer, and social safety nets are strained. Nashville's growth story has curdled into an affordability collapse that threatens the very fabric of its economy. What makes Nashville's crisis even more striking is that it was supposed to be a refuge. For years, it was marketed as the affordable alternative to Atlanta or Chicago, a place where the middle class could still thrive. Instead, it now serves as a stark warning that no city is immune once growth outpaces wages and speculation drives prices skyward. And yet, as devastating as Nashville's story is, the next city shows how affordability can unravel in an entirely different way. High in the Mountain West, housing costs have surged by hundreds of thousands of dollars in just 1 decade, creating a debt load that threatens to crush families for generations. Salt Lake City, Utah, has witnessed one of the steepest housing cost explosions in the Mountain West. In just the past decade, the median home price has increased by nearly $300,000, vaulting from roughly $270,000 in 2013 to more than $570,000 in 2025. That leap has obliterated the possibility of affordable homeownership for the city's middle class. The financial strain is staggering. Households in Salt Lake City are now spending more than 45% of their income on mortgage payments, far beyond the 30% threshold economists use to define affordability. Families who stretched to buy during the recent boom are now saddled with debt loads that leave little margin for anything else. For many, even a modest interest rate hike has turned monthly payments into an unbearable burden. Renters face a parallel crisis. Since 2018, average rents in Salt Lake City have climbed by more than 30%, forcing many households to devote well over a third of their income just to keep from being displaced. Those who can't keep up are moving farther into the suburbs, where rising costs quickly follow, or leaving Utah entirely in search of cheaper ground. The social consequences are visible across the city. Homelessness in Salt Lake County has grown by double digits since 2020, with shelters overwhelmed and tent encampments spreading near freeway underpasses. At the same time, younger residents, especially those earning entry-level wages, increasingly report that they see no path to ever owning a home in the city where they grew up. The economic ripple effects are already being felt. As housing consumes a larger share of paychecks, discretionary spending has contracted. Local businesses face thinning customer bases, and municipal leaders worry about the sustainability of tax revenues as growth slows. The city once promoted as a family-friendly alternative to coastal markets is instead becoming a place where only the wealthiest households can stay. Salt Lake City's transformation from an affordable haven into a high-cost pressure cooker demonstrates how quickly a housing market can tilt from opportunity to exclusion. A decade of rapid price escalation, stagnant wage growth, and rising debt has created a fragile foundation that leaves thousands vulnerable to financial collapse. And yet, Salt Lake City is only one part of a broader pattern. Because the next city on our list shows how affordability can unravel in the Southeast, where the combined weight of soaring housing costs and skyrocketing insurance premiums is forcing families into impossible financial choices. Tampa, Florida, has become one of the most punishing examples of how housing costs and insurance premiums can collide to crush affordability. Since 2022, the average homeowner's insurance bill in Tampa has increased by more than 60%, a surge fueled by mounting hurricane risk and insurers abandoning the state. For many families, the cost of insurance alone can exceed their monthly property tax bill, transforming ownership from a dream into a financial trap. Housing itself is no better. In 2013, the median home value in Tampa hovered just above $160,000. By 2025, that figure has rocketed past $350,000, more than doubling in a little over a decade. Renters are also under siege. A typical 2-bedroom apartment now averages around $2,000 a month, forcing many households to spend close to 40% of their income simply to avoid eviction. The economic fallout in Tampa carries a distinct dimension compared to other cities. Insurance instability doesn't just drain homeowners. It destabilizes entire neighborhoods. Families unable to afford coverage walk away from properties, leaving vacant houses behind. That weakens nearby property values, reduces county tax revenues, and fuels a cycle of disinvestment. Local governments, already strained, face the double blow of rising recovery costs from storms and shrinking resources to fund them. Tourism, the heartbeat of Tampa's economy, is also under pressure. As housing costs soar, service workers struggle to stay within commuting distance of the hotels, bars, and attractions that drive the city's brand. Some businesses have cut hours or closed locations altogether because they simply cannot find affordable staff. What once made Tampa vibrant, a steady flow of workers, affordable housing, and a reliable tourism economy, is being hollowed out. The result is a city caught between two collapsing fronts: housing costs rising faster than wages, and insurance costs spiraling into uncharted territory. For the middle class, it means sacrificing savings, draining emergency funds, or going without coverage entirely. For retirees on fixed incomes, it means losing homes outright to a system designed to protect them. Tampa was supposed to represent Florida's balance, a place with access to the coast, but less chaos than Miami and less expense than Orlando. That balance has vanished. Today, the city is a showcase of how financial pressures tied to climate risk can unravel affordability faster than wages or rents alone. And if you think Tampa's storm is unique, wait until you see what's happening in the desert. Because the next city on this list is facing a different kind of collapse, where one of the nation's highest debt-to-income ratios is driving households in Las Vegas toward the edge of insolvency. Las Vegas has become a textbook case of households drowning in debt. In 2025, the typical debt-to-income ratio for homeowners here is among the highest in the nation, with many families carrying obligations that consume more than 45% of their monthly earnings. That leaves little margin for savings, emergencies, or even basic living expenses. The housing market, once fueled by constant in-migration and investor speculation, has become increasingly unstable. In 2012, the median home in Las Vegas could be purchased for under $130,000. By 2025, that same home is valued at more than $400,000, tripling in just over a decade. This rapid escalation, combined with rising borrowing costs, has pushed affordability far out of reach for the working class. Rental costs reveal a similar squeeze. A two-bedroom apartment in Las Vegas now averages around $1,900 per month compared to about $1,300 just 5 years ago. That means renters are devoting more than 35% of their incomes to housing, well beyond the affordability line. Eviction filings have spiked in Clark County as households unable to manage rising rents and utility bills fall behind. The financial instability in Las Vegas is compounded by the city's heavy dependence on a tourism-driven economy. When housing costs soar, service workers, who make up a large share of the labor force, are the first to feel the pressure. Many are leaving the city altogether, creating labor shortages that ripple through casinos, hotels, and restaurants. Businesses that once operated 24 hours a day now struggle to staff basic shifts, undermining the very industry that supports the city's tax revenues. Another looming threat is the return of foreclosure activity. While not yet at the levels seen during the crash of 2008, filings in 2025 have been climbing steadily. Families who stretched to buy during the low-interest boom of the early 2020s are now discovering they cannot sustain payments at higher rates. For a city that still bears the scars of the last housing meltdown, even a modest rise in foreclosures raises fears of another cascading downturn. Las Vegas illustrates how quickly a city built on growth and speculation can tilt toward collapse when costs accelerate faster than incomes. The bright lights of the Strip mask a growing financial fragility, where households are shackled by debt, rents, strained paychecks, and foreclosures are beginning to rise once more. And yet, Las Vegas is not alone. Because the next city on our list demonstrates how, even in the Pacific Northwest, soaring housing costs and deepening economic pressures are unraveling affordability at a pace that residents never imagined possible. Portland, Oregon, has become a striking example of a city where costs are climbing while confidence collapses. In the past year alone, rents have surged by more than 11%. the sharpest rise in the Pacific Northwest. For thousands of households, that single spike pushed their rent-to-income ratios beyond the 30% line, making even modest apartments unaffordable. The housing market tells a similar story. In 2015, the median home value in Portland was around $300,000. By 2025, it has surged to more than $550,000, nearly doubling in a single decade. Wages, meanwhile, have grown at only a fraction of that pace. For middle-class families, the mismatch has translated into higher borrowing, heavier debt loads, and fewer paths to stability. But Portland's affordability crisis is not just about rising prices. It is about the erosion of livability. Multnomah County has recorded a double-digit increase in homelessness since 2020, fueled by eviction filings, inflation, and stagnant wages. Tent encampments have appeared along highways and near downtown bridges, reshaping the urban landscape and straining city resources. The economic ripple effects here are unique. As costs climb, many higher-income households are leaving Portland for surrounding counties or entirely different states. That outflow reduces the tax base even as demand for social services expands. Businesses in the city core face declining foot traffic, while suburban communities inherit the pressure of rising housing demand. The result is a fractured region where affordability problems spread outward instead of resolving. Adding to the strain are rising property taxes, which now average nearly 1.5% of home value annually. For a family in a $500,000 home, that means more than $7,000 a year, a cost that compounds existing mortgage and insurance burdens. When paired with utilities and transportation, the total monthly expense for living in Portland has climbed into territory once reserved for far larger metros. For many residents, the frustration is not just financial but cultural. Portland was once celebrated as an accessible, community-driven city. Today, its economic pressures are eroding that identity, pushing younger workers, artists, and even small business owners out. The city that branded itself as quirky and livable is becoming defined by scarcity and survival. Portland's story is a sobering warning. When rents surge, property taxes swell, and incomes stagnate, even a mid-sized city with a reputation for livability can collapse into unaffordability. And yet, Portland's affordability crisis is not the most severe. Because the next city on our list, Charlotte, North Carolina, reveals how rapidly growing Sunbelt metros are producing their own affordability nightmare, with housing prices far outpacing incomes and debt piling up across the region. Charlotte, North Carolina has become one of the fastest rising housing markets in the Southeast, and one of the least affordable for the very people who live there. Since 2010, the median home price in Charlotte has climbed by nearly 80%, far outstripping local wage growth. By 2025, the typical home here now costs more than $450,000, while median household income sits below $80,000. The gap is leaving families stretching every dollar just to compete for shrinking options. Renters are under no less strain. In 2015, an average two-bedroom apartment in Charlotte cost around $1,000 per month. Today, that figure is closer to $1,600, a jump of more than 50% in a decade. For households earning the city's median income, that translates into spending nearly 40% of paychecks on rent, far above the 30% affordability threshold. Behind the glossy skyline of Bank of America's headquarters and a booming financial sector, the reality for most residents is very different. Mortgage delinquencies have begun ticking upward in Mecklenburg County, signaling that the debt burden is starting to fracture household budgets. At the same time, property taxes on rising home values have added hundreds, even thousands, to annual housing costs. For middle-income families, the result is a relentless cycle. Higher rent, higher debt, higher taxes, but no relief. The ripple effects extend far beyond individual households. Charlotte's rapid expansion has strained infrastructure, driven traffic congestion to record levels, and pushed more workers to outlying counties. Suburban sprawl spreads costs wider, but affordability never improves. Even the promise of economic opportunity tied to the city's financial hub hasn't translated into stability for most residents. Here's the part almost no one outside of North Carolina is talking about. Charlotte's affordability crisis is creating a two-tier city. On one side, higher income transplants and corporate employees who can weather rising costs. On the other, longtime residents who are being priced out of their neighborhoods and forced farther away from the opportunities the city once promised. That divide is growing wider each year, and it is reshaping Charlotte into a city defined more by exclusion than access. Charlotte is more than just another unaffordable metro. It is a glimpse into America's future if housing costs keep accelerating unchecked, booming economies paired with collapsing affordability and thriving skylines, masking household debt and displacement. And if Charlotte's affordability collapse is sobering, wait until you see what's happening in Florida. Because the #1 city on this list shows how the combined forces of rising home values, surging rents, and exploding insurance premiums are converging into a perfect storm of unaffordability. Orlando, Florida has become ground zero for one of the most severe affordability crises in the nation. In 2025, the median home price in the Orlando metro has climbed to more than $420,000, nearly double what it was a decade ago. For the average household earning less than $80,000 a year, buying a home in the so-called affordable heart of Florida is now out of reach. Renters are faring no better. The cost of a 2-bedroom apartment has surged by more than 50% since 2015, with average rents now hovering close to $2,000 a month. That forces many families to spend more than 40% of their income just to keep a roof overhead. Eviction filings in Orange County have jumped as wages fail to keep pace with the relentless climb in housing costs. But Orlando's collapse is not just about homes and apartments. Insurance premiums in Florida have become some of the fastest rising in the country, with rates climbing more than 60% in just 3 years. Families who stretched their finances to purchase homes during the recent boom are now discovering that the monthly insurance bill can equal or even exceed their mortgage payment. For retirees on fixed incomes, that extra cost is devastating, forcing many to abandon properties they once thought they would keep for life. The economic consequences ripple outward in ways unique to Orlando. The city's identity as a global tourism hub requires a massive service workforce, but skyrocketing costs are driving those workers out. Restaurants, hotels, and attractions are facing shortages not because visitors have disappeared, but because employees can no longer afford to live within commuting distance. The same pressure is hitting small businesses, which are watching operating costs rise while their customer base shrinks. What makes Orlando especially alarming is its symbolism. For decades, it was sold as an affordable alternative to Miami or Tampa, a place where families could buy homes, retirees could stretch their savings, and workers could live within reach of the jobs that powered the region. That promise has been erased. Orlando today is no longer a refuge. It is a cautionary tale of how fast affordability can collapse when housing prices, rent burdens, and insurance premiums converge into a perfect storm. And if Orlando, with its global draw and steady growth, can collapse this quickly, what does that say about the future of the rest of the country? From Austin to Orlando, the story is the same. The very cities once seen as opportunities are now crumbling under the weight of costs no family can bear. In Denver, mortgages swallow nearly 70% of household incomes. In Phoenix, foreclosure filings have surged by more than 40%. In Nashville and Salt Lake City, rents devour paychecks, while homelessness rises across counties. Tampa shows how insurance can bankrupt entire neighborhoods, and Las Vegas reveals what happens when debt becomes a way of life. Portland's cultural heart is fading as prices climb. Charlotte is splitting into 2 separate cities, and Orlando has fallen into a perfect storm of housing, rent, and insurance that threatens the very core of Florida's future. These aren't isolated failures. They are signals of an affordability collapse spreading across America. And the truth is, your city could be next. If you've stayed with us this far, you're part of the few who see what's really happening. Subscribe now, because in the videos ahead, we're uncovering even more shocking stories of American cities unraveling before our eyes.